Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at a devblog for the next major update in War Thunder, and the ride just continues after the last event basically just finished. It's now time for another devblog season. This time it's for the Vickers Mk.11, which is going to be a light tank coming in for Britain. They did say they were going to bring in more light tanks, and not really a surprise to see this one. This one was one on the radar for a long time, especially since a lot of its parts have already been put into War Thunder in different vehicles. It's going to be in rank 6, which is pretty interesting, and give another opportunity for scouting to be done for Britain. Let's get into the history of this vehicle. Development of the Mk.11 began in 1990, with Vickers launching the program under its own initiative in order to meet a requirement from the Australian Armed Forces for a new long-range patrol vehicle. Given its unique intended use case, the Mk.11 was designed as a wheeled APC, armed with a 105mm cannon and fitted with a spacious fighting compartment. Full-scale development of the vehicle began in March 1993, with a first prototype already being displayed at the UK Armed Forces exhibition in September. Vickers ensured a high development speed by utilising off-the-shelf components in nearly all aspects of the vehicle, while only applying minor design modifications. As a result, the hull of the vehicle was based on the Timony Mark 8 APC, while the turret was adopted from the Vickers VFM5 light tank design. Apart from the long-range patrol version, a whole vehicle family was also designed around the platform, including a dedicated APC, an SPAAG, ATGM carrier, command, and also ambulance vehicles, as well as others. However, despite the rapid development and broad possible applications, the Mk.11 failed to attract any interest from potential operators. As a result, the vehicle never left the prototype stage, with only one unit ever being produced. So this Vickers Mk.11 does marry some ideas that I actually really enjoy. The VFM5 as a vehicle in War Thunder is actually pretty fun, and it's one of those which I feel was criminally underrated for the longest time, because for some reason it was always really above its BR bracket, where it really shouldn't have been. And now that it's in a much better place, I'd highly recommend playing it because it is quite a lot of fun. Now, there's a huge difference between the VFM5 and also the Vickers Mk.11, and that's of course the chassis. The chassis of this Mk.11 is absolutely huge. They even say in the Devblog, it's quite funny how they actually talk about it. They say, to put it into perspective, its height is almost the size of 2 6-foot people standing on top of each other. I don't know why they don't just say like 11 foot or 12 foot, but there you go. That's how big the vehicle is. It turns out that it is quite a chunky boy. And this has actually been something we've seen quite a lot. So we've seen the Patria, of course, the good old APC with the AT element, and the Vickers Mk.11 is no different. So it looks like this might be the next type of vehicle they're going to add to War Thunder. These just massive behemoths, which have a ton of empty space inside of them, because obviously you're supposed to have some additional crew members inside of them. And then you're just going to kind of shoot through it, and then it's going to be able to shoot back. So it's going to be super key where you end up shooting these types of vehicles. The vehicle itself is going to have 4 crew when it comes to the game, because technically it could actually have 4 crews and 7 additional ones, but as we know, the game doesn't really ever put in the additional ones if they aren't, consistent with the running of the vehicle. So instead, you're probably going to get a driver at the front and then 3 people in the turret, since it is manually loaded. Now, as I said, the general turret platform is good. Sometimes, because it's British, you get some weird APFS DS rounds instead of the standard ones, but it should be completely fine. And also, it'll get a stabilizer, which will be nice. I don't think it'll get thermal sights, which is one of the big issues with it. So we'll have to see how that goes. And according to this, its mobility should be pretty good at 105 kilometers an hour. One of the interesting things about these wheeled vehicles is they really have been just motoring around the place. If you played around the BRs where this thing's going to be, which is probably going to be around 8.7, 790, around that Chieftain area, just below the VFM5. What has happened is there's just so many vehicles like the Centauro, the Type 16s, and they all just fly about the place at ridiculous knots. And there was times where I was playing the Object 435, or even just playing stuff like the Chieftain, where I would get to my initial position on my side of the map in the first 2 minutes of the game, and there's already something like a Type 16 by my flank, and already just killing everything. It's nuts how crazy those vehicle mobilities are. Now, they did change them in one of the most recent changelogs, but if I'm honest with you, they're still going to motor around the place, thanks to the changes they made a few updates ago. I remember a little bit ago when a lot of these wheeled vehicles really struggled when it came to their mobility, and they weren't able to move around the place at all. And now, since they've added in a bunch of them, they've obviously been working on the friction that the wheels are supposed to have, and gave them quite a decent buff, meaning that they have very good mobility, most of the time much better than tracked vehicles. The transmission's going to make a big difference on this thing, whether it's going to be able to reposition or not, since the issue with it is it's so large and also has pretty much no armor. It means that repositioning is going to be key to not just keeping alive from the ground, but this is going to be a massive target for CAS. And that's one of the things that never really gets brought up when it comes to these massive chunky vehicles from space or from guided bomb area, which is where this thing will sit at. It's very easy to mark these targets and also very easy to overpressure them. If you've ever played something like the Class 3P, if you've ever played, as we talked about, the Patriot variant, you know what it's like trying to face CAS with these things. It's pretty much impossible. And since this vehicle doesn't even have a pintle mount, you basically just have the main gun, and that's about it to be able to deal with everything that's going around. You do have smoke grenades though, so at least there's that. There's something which can be pretty useful there. And also, at the same time, you will be able to pretty much, kill anything that you find on the ground with the gun. So, as a vehicle, this one definitely feels like a first spawn vehicle. It feels like one to be able to go fast, get around the flank, and then hammer people from the side. And if you're not able to, then obviously scout them for your team. But if you run this as a second or third vehicle, you're just going to get clapped by either some other flanker, which you should have dealt with while playing this thing, or it's going to be one of those situations where you're just going to get cast to death. So even though this vehicle looks really fun, and I'm very happy to see it just because it's been one of those that we've been waiting for a long time, it's just one of those which has a very limited specialty when it comes to how it's going to play. So hopefully, people enjoy it, and hopefully people have a good time with it. It's nice to see more British light tanks. We've talked about the fact in the past that Britain sometimes gets left behind in those cases, but then again, they had South Africa added to them, and most of those were light tanks, so it kind of was fine. But a lot of people talk about stuff like the Scorpion, for example, and even, bring up things like the Ferret, which is quite hilarious to me. But the Vickers Mk.11 is another light tank. It fills a slightly separate BR bracket from the VFM5, but I don't think it's going to be, that mid-tier light tank that a lot of people want. I don't think that's really going to exist in the vehicle. It's still going to be fun though, and the mobility is really going to be the part which matters the most. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R., and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.